Central Florida. This vacation paradise attracts 75 million visitors each year. They come to bathe on beaches, trek through the dense wilderness, and soak up the only tropical climate in the U.S. The state's warm temperatures provide the perfect environment for many species, including animals not native to the area, like Burmese pythons and red piranha. And now there are reports of another dangerous exotic animal on the loose here.
This thing looked very wild looking, like it wouldn't be a creature you would see in the zoo.
Entire body covered with about 1 inch fur or hair. They can be bipedal, or they can be quadrupedal, or start out bipedal and drop to quadrupedal.
He hunched. He got bristled. His knuckles came out. He came at me full bore.
And then I saw an animal which resembled a chimpanzee.
Eyewitnesses report seeing a hairy animal about 4 feet tall, weighing some 200 pounds, and with strength 4 times that of a human. The descriptions most closely match a chimpanzee. Despite Hollywood's portrayal of a cute and cuddly creature, chimps are extremely territorial. They assert their innate need for dominance, sometimes with devastating results.
This was one of the worst crime scenes I've ever been at in my 29 years on the Stanford Police Department.
Captain Richard Conklin was on the scene when a pet chimpanzee attacked a woman in Stamford, Connecticut.
When we first arrived, the scene of the attack was very bloody. There was articles of clothing strewn around, blood everywhere.
Sandra Harold's pet chimp Travis had escaped from his enclosure with Harold's car keys. When Harold and friend Charla Nash tried to get the chimp back indoors, the animal attacked. As Travis savagely assaulted Nash, Harold fled to phone the police.
The chimpanzee turned and looked and gave her a very menacing type look. And at that point, she fled to a parked car and took refuge in a car where she locked the car. And at that point is when she called the 911 call in.
Stanford 911, where's your emergency?
This is Sandy. 231 Road.
Charla Nash was at the mercy of the aggressive animal.
What, Crimin Road?
What's the problem?
Send the police. Send the police.
What's the problem there?
Harold could only watch helplessly as Nash was viciously attacked. The 911 calls capture the horror of every minute.
Send the police up with a gun. Please, hurry up. He's killing my girlfriend.
What is the problem?
He's killing my friend.
Who's killing your friend?
My chimpanzee.
The animal bit Nash repeatedly and then began to eat her.
The woman's face was completely torn and destroyed. A very severe trauma, some of the worst I've ever seen to a human's face. And the first responding emergency personnel could not even identify if it was a man or a woman at that point.
The victim lost her nose, upper and lower lips, eyelids, and both her hands. And then the animal even tried to attack the arriving officers.
As they arrived on the scene, the chimpanzee was still loose on the grounds. The chimp went to his passenger side and actually tried to open the door to access the car. And he couldn't, that door was locked. He couldn't access the patrol car on that side. The chimp named Travis became very agitated and started pounding on the car. And then with one blow, knocked the mirror right off the passenger side of the car, the side view mirror. Then the chimpanzee went around the car and went up to the driver's side door. And the chimpanzee was able to open that door and started to come in to attack the officer. The officer very quickly removed his handgun and shot the chimpanzee 4 times at very, very close range. And it was a very horrific scene. The chimpanzee was covered in blood from its attack.
The attack on the officer shows the intelligence of the animal. The chimp was finally killed, but the carnage was already complete.
Most of the very severe crime scenes we've been where humans are involved, oftentimes they use weapons, knives, sharpened edges, handguns, rifles, This chimpanzee accomplished all this with its bare hands and mouth, and it just shows how ferocious and how strong they are.
The chimp responsible for the vicious attack had worked in television commercials. But like all chimps, once it reached sexual maturity, it became stronger and more aggressive. This change is something that most owners don't anticipate.
Little do they know, or little do they care, what it's going to grow up to be.
Scott Lope is the director of operations at Big Cat Rescue in Tampa, Florida. He is also an expert on dangerous exotic pet species.
What people don't realize, this animal has a very long lifespan, 50, 60 years, and it's going to be miserable. It's going to reach sexual maturity, and then all bets are off. It's not going to be content to wear clothes and just be this happy, fun little guy that bounces around and people laugh at and take pictures with. It's going to be a very sexually aggressive, very powerful, very dangerous, big animal.
When an owner realizes they are no longer capable of handling the beasts, there are few options.
You could let it go, it could injure someone without anyone even knowing that these accidents occur. With the loopholes in the permitting process and the true liabilities for the owner of the chimps, it's very possible that an escape could go unreported.
Some states do not even regulate the ownership of these animals.
There's still 13 states in the U.S. that don't have any laws whatsoever regulating exotic animals. In many of these states, you could go buy a chimp, buy an exotic animal on the internet, and no one would ever know.
If a chimp either escaped or was released into the wild by a private owner, Florida could be the easiest habitat for such an animal to thrive in.
It's very possible that one could be escaped or turned loose and out there living somewhere in Florida.
But not all experts believe that chimps could live in the wilds of Florida.
There are a lot of things that happen that would make this very difficult to believe.
Terry Wolf is the wildlife director at Lion Country Safari in Florida.
First of all, any chimp that's going to be running around the swamps of South Florida would probably be somebody's pet or an escapee that had familiarity with people. They're going to have knowledge that people have food. They're going to seek those people out for food. So there would be constant conflict, and they'd be very aware of it.
In addition, lack of familiarity with chimpanzees may lead to a case of misidentification.
Most people don't know what a chimpanzee is. When they see a chimp or recognize a chimp, that's that 6-year-old that's in the TV commercial or in the circus act, or it's entertaining them somehow. It's not the adults, not the 180-pound males that we work with on a daily basis here.
Since the year 2000, there have been at least 70 reports of chimpanzees in the swamps of Florida. Now Monster Quest will launch an expedition in search of these wild chimps.
My job today is to scout the area and look for natural travel corridors, potential food sources. More importantly, with the drought that they've had down here for the last 3 years, I'm going to be looking for water sources.
Animal tracker Mark Peterson leads the investigation.
If there are any primate-type animals down here, with the technology at my disposal and the trail cams that we have out, we have good odds of finding it.
The team will be searching the Green Swamp, located between Tampa and Orlando. The Green Swamp covers 560,000 acres of Florida backcountry. The swamp is full of dangerous animals, including wild boar, bobcats, alligators, and poisonous snakes.
There's cottonmouths down here, a lot of rattlesnakes, big cottonmouths, and coral snakes, all venomous. And they're real easy to step on or surprise because the leaf cover on the ground is real thick, and you never know where one is.
And we're looking for evidence that primates could be here or that they could exist in this habitat.
Primatologist Dr. Hogan Giroux has spent over 3,000 hours observing chimpanzees in the jungles of Africa.
Chimpanzees in the wild require a certain type of environment. They require an environment where there aren't extremes in temperatures, where there's an adequate water source. Typically, there has to also be heavy vegetation At a minimum, they need a requirement of a large amount of fruit in the area.
Giroux also points to the need for a breeding population of chimps to enable the species to survive here.
One of the most important things that chimpanzees need to survive is they need other chimpanzees.
He will use his extensive experience to determine whether chimpanzees could live here.
I'm going to be looking for potential locations where primates could find food, where primates could nest at night, signs of habitat that could sustain primates.
The team deploys a variety of camera traps, including Buckeye wireless systems.
Automatically sends a signal to your computer up to 1.5 miles away. I just have to be able to drive within 1 mile from the camera and then download it right to my computer.
Peterson will be using a micron thermal camera. The device shows heat from not only anything within its view, but also residual heat left from any recent activity.
It's going to change that color from blue to maybe yellow or green or potentially red, depending on how hot it is.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
In preparation for the land search, Peterson will scout the area from the air.
What we're going to do is take this over the green swamp wilderness area, and we're going to look for some suitable places to go down trails and roads and things like that and try and get back into the backcountry.
The team will be using a unique gyroplane aircraft. It will give them a bird's eye view of the terrain and enable them to identify ground details.
They can fly very slow and very low to the ground.
Gyroplane is a very unique aircraft. It looks similar to a helicopter, but it's not. It flies more like a fixed-wing aircraft, simplicity of fixed-wing. Top speed, 110 miles per hour.
I'm going to have my GPS, and my partner Hogan's going to have his GPS as well, and he'll be down on the ground with our ranger riding around. And I'll give him some coordinates of places that I think we should get to and try and scout on foot.
Zephyr Hills traffic, Auto Gyro 395 Romeo, taxiing on the runway 044 departure.
Everything looks good. The winds are favorable, and weather, hardly any clouds in the sky, so we're looking good.
From the air, the size of the swamp is imposing. Even though they are only 40 miles from the city of Orlando, Peterson is convinced an animal could remain hidden here.
Yeah, this is a great area out here. It's got some good cuts and some good roads. It should be some good travel for us.
The green swamp is normally full of water, but this spring has been very dry, leaving just a few water holes visible from the air.
Let's look around and look at some of those wet spots back there. I think we saw a few.
Chimps would need a reliable water source nearby, making watering holes the obvious place to start the search.
Some nice roads out here for travel. We'll have some good access to the swamp. Yeah, I've already got a couple of GPS coordinates that I can give to Hogan.
Monster Quest is searching the swamps of Central Florida for wild chimps on the loose.
Well, we've had chimpanzees here for probably at least as long as we've had people here.
Cryptozoologist Scott Marlowe says Florida has a long history of chimp activity.
And of course they arrived with humans and humans brought them here. We used to have many years ago roadside carnivals and roadside zoos and little attractions before the advent of the modern theme park. And in some cases these facilities, particularly back in the 20s and I think also in the 40s, many of them went out of business, and rather than simply take their animals with them, they just let them loose into the environment. And that's been a perennial problem. Florida's always battling exotic species.
The famed showman P.T. Barnum was displaying chimpanzees in Florida as early as 1896. Then in May 1952, a chimpanzee named Congo escaped from a zoo in Hialeah, Florida by biting his handler and scaling a 6-foot fence. It took a search party of 200 people to eventually track down and kill the beast. And in December 1963, Florida police pulled over a car being driven by a chimpanzee trained to drive by a carnival showman. Eyewitnesses claim that these creatures may still be living and thriving in the wild.
This thing looked very wild looking, like it wouldn't be a creature you would see in the zoo. And while I was driving along near 1792 on the edge of the green swamp, I saw a creature come out of the woods from one side of the road to the other side of the road. It first appeared like I thought it was a bear, and then I thought to myself, well, a bear doesn't move quite like that. You know, it doesn't take larger leaps when he moves.
Florida resident Steve Keller quickly pulled the car over to get a better look.
I thought it looked more like an ape-like looking creature because it had thinner hair and it was a little thinner than a bear, a lot thinner than a bear, and took rather large leaps when it went from one side of the road to the other side of the road. And I know primates can run on all fours, and this thing was running on all fours. It was a bizarre sighting.
While there are many sightings, physical proof remains elusive. And the question of sustainability is also an issue. The Monster Quest science team will use digital cartography to determine if chimpanzees could really survive in Florida swamps. They'll compare the environmental features of the state's green swamp area with those of a known chimp habitat in Mali, Africa. This Western African country has a population of over 1,000 chimpanzees.
Well, with cartography, we can combine a lot of complicated statistical data, be it in the form of graphs or research. We can combine all that into a single image, and in this case, two images that we can overlay or put next to each other and make a really good analysis or comparison of the two places.
Stace Wright is co-owner of Eureka Cartography and is the senior cartographer. He will be plotting and comparing temperature, rainfall, vegetation, and human influence.
When you look carefully at these two areas, one in Africa, one in North America, the first thing you think is, oh, they must be so different. But when you actually start putting together the data and comparing these places, you'll find that they're not as different as you might think. First thing I wanted to do was create a globe image that would allow us to easily see where these two places are in the world and how they relate to each other. So I created an orthographic projection of the line work and added some graticule lines, that's the longitude and latitude, so I could lay them over the top of the coastlines, to which I added lakes and rivers.
Mark Peterson and primatologist Dr. Hogan Giroux head to promising areas identified from the air.
So Mark, this is one of the areas where you sent me the GPS coordinates to?
Yes. It looked like a nice dry gully here that usually ends up coming to a water source as well.
Almost immediately, they spot a citrus tree. This is a good sign.
It's past their season now. There's an old one there. Here, what do you think that is?
Well, it looks like it may be a citrus, but it's hard to tell from these overripe ones.
Do you think that'd be good food source for chimpanzees?
It's a potential food source. They definitely need a lot of this kind of fruit, so we should definitely keep looking, see what we can find.
You can see that there was water in these creeks before, but not enough for us right now.
Peterson follows the dry riverbed to a watering hole.
Cat track right here. We've got a turkey track right here.
I've got another one here too.
Lots of deer tracks.
Loaded with them.
Loaded with deer tracks. There's some coon tracks. There's hog. That's not deer, that's hog right there. I'll tell you what, you get a food or a water source out here like this, there's not a lot of water in this area.
It's just a highway.
It is, it's literally a highway. Obviously a good spot for camera.
Yeah, this is
Trail
a great
cameras.
location for a camera trap.
Before setting up the camera, Peterson baits the area with a pheromone chip.
This has got chimpanzee scent on it. So the hope would be that when we hang this here, if there were any primates in this area, they would smell this and come to check it out. If nothing else, a curiosity type lure. Now we'll go set up our camera and wait.
As Peterson works on setting up the camera trap, he realizes they are not alone.
What was that in the water?
I don't know.
Monster Quest is searching deep in the swamps of central Florida for evidence of chimpanzees living in the wild. Chimpanzees are notorious escape artists, with the ability to open doors and locks simply by watching how humans do it.
Like most primates, and indeed most animals, they learn by observation. They're extremely intelligent, particularly if they're human-raised.
Scott Marlowe cites a study conducted by psychologist Wolfgang Kohler in the early 1900s.
Chimps were left with lengths of bamboo or a pile of crates, and the problem of a banana or some type of food being hung at the top of a cage out of reach, and the chimps, independent of anyone instructing them how to do this, were able to assemble the bamboo poles to make something long enough to whack at the bananas, or put the crates as high as 4 stories in order to scramble up the crates in order to retrieve the material. So they've got that kind of problem-solving intelligence.
With this level of intelligence and a chimpanzee's incredible strength, encounters with these beasts can be devastating.
The next thing I know, I hear the chimp actually stomping his feet in the ground, coming after her.
St. James Davis and his wife LaDonna had raised their pet chimpanzee Mo from birth. The Davises treated the primate like a son. They were celebrating Mo's birthday at the chimp sanctuary where he lived.
We went to bring him up his toys and balloons and presents, and so we was having a good time. Donna got the cake out of the car, was at a table, and she cut me a piece of cake, and Mo a piece of cake.
As Mo patiently waited behind the cage bars for his treat, 4 other chimps escaped from a separate pen. One of these chimps, a male, spotted the Davises and started to display aggression.
And at that moment, he came around from behind the tree, and I knew we were in trouble instantly.
Before either husband or wife could react, the brutal attack began.
He had her face and her hair with one hand, and he had her thumb and the other in his mouth, and he bit her thumb off. Well, she started yelling and screaming bloody murder.
A second chimp joined the attack. To protect his wife, Davis pushed her underneath a picnic table.
We're stomping and pushing, and he takes his thumb and gouge out my eye and rip my eyebrow off, my nose, my mouth. 5 bites to the head, 4 to the neck, and biting fingers off, and one's chewing on my privates and my hind end. He ate so much out of my hind end, he got in my sciatic nerve, and that's why my legs don't work. He ate the bottom off of my left foot.
I can remember James saying, "Stay down, keep back."
The brutal attack lasted 15 minutes before a sanctuary worker was able to shoot and kill both animals.
I'll never forget this as long as I live. A lady came up, I believe it was in an animal control unit. She approached, and I could hear her let out a scream, and she said, "My God, what went on here?" And that's one of the things that stays with me. I'll hear that ring in my ear forever.
Authorities in Southern California have launched a desperate search for someone missing in the mountains. They're not looking for a missing hiker. They're actually looking for a chimpanzee named Mo. This escaped chimp is considered potentially dangerous. Mo made headlines 3 years ago when his owners were brutally attacked by 2 other chimpanzees at the sanctuary where Mo lived in Caliente. Authorities are focusing their search in the hills around San Bernardino.
Mo, the Davises' own pet chimp, got out just 3 years after the attack.
When you're searching for anything, you're looking for any sign they may leave behind, such as scat, footprints.
Martine Collette helped lead the search for the escaped chimp.
In a case of primates, broken branches. In the case of being in a fruiting tree, you will look for leftover trees, fruit on the bottom of the tree. You're looking for anything that is normal for that animal to do. We searched for Mo for approximately 5 weeks, possibly even 6, with helicopters, vehicles, foot, dogs. No sign of the chimpanzee was ever found.
Most thought Mo perished in the hills around San Bernardino, until this eyewitness account of a chimpanzee at large close to Los Angeles.
And I wasn't prepared to see what I saw in the wilderness.
While hiking with friends in the San Gorgonio Mountains, Grace Hilario became separated from her group.
As I was heading back down the mountain, there was a number of different trails, and I went on the wrong trail, and I immediately knew that I was lost. Ultimately, I was lost in the mountains for 3 days and 2 nights. I didn't have much food. I had half a sandwich and half a water bottle, and I was just thinking about my family and friends, and if I was ever going to see them again. I was on a flat rock, and I was just sitting there contemplating how to get out of here. And then I was just looking up at the sky and looking around, and then I saw a dark brown and gray colored animal, and had a flat face, and it was hunched over, and it was like running. And it was just scurrying across past the trees. It was probably 100 feet from me. Here, at first I thought it was a bear. I was just scared at first. But the way it was postured and the way his face looked, it looked like a monkey.
Some experts believe that Hilario's sighting could be the escaped chimp Mo. While setting a camera trap near a waterhole, Mark Peterson and Dr. Hogan Giroux discovered they were being watched.
Wow, look at that. This owl is just gorgeous. He's coming to this water.
The drought in the area may work to the team's advantage.
Everything in this area is going to migrate to this one water source. That's why we're finding so many signs. Everything is going to come here.
As darkness descends, the team sets out to explore the swamps with thermal imaging cameras.
If there are chimps in the area, they're going to bed down at night. They're going to make a nest in the trees where they feel secure. That's what chimpanzees do in the wild, so that's what we'd expect them to do here. That's why we're going out at night with a thermal camera, because they're going to be stationary, and we may actually get a chance to see a body if there's one around.
Right now, the ground is all blue. The trees are a little bit yellowish, and any heat source turns out bright red.
If there were primates in this area, we'd expect to see them up in this canopy area.
The team pushes deeper into the swamp, scanning the forest canopy. Suddenly, the camera reveals something in the brush.
Obviously, it's picking up a heat source.
Monster Quest is in Florida, searching for chimpanzees in the wild. Sightings of these creatures range across the state, and a chimp on the loose is a frightening possibility.
I saw an animal along the side of the road that was just on the edge of the forest and kind of moving in the direction of the road very tentatively.
Scott Marlowe says that he was driving just outside of Orlando when he had his encounter.
I was driving, and it was relatively early one morning.
As first light was breaking, Marlowe says the hair-covered creature crossed the road in front of him. Its description matched only one animal.
And my immediate response was a double take, because my thought was, what on earth is a chimpanzee doing here?
Chimpanzees can live to be 40 years old or more in captivity and grow to be 180 pounds. They can also be very dangerous.
When a chimpanzee goes into attack mode, generally they need to work themselves up a little bit first. They start to do a demonstration, slamming their fist onto walls or on the ground, the pileoerection where the hair comes up on their back and on their neck and all around to make them look a lot bigger than they really are. The screaming and the hooting and the hollering, the males will start to it just gets louder and louder and louder until they just hit the high pitch and they charge and go to it.
Terry Wolf is skeptical that captive chimps know this type of behavior. He says because they have not learned this activity, they are unpredictable.
When a chimpanzee attacks, generally they have to work themselves up to that frenzy first. There's not just a spontaneous attack, normally. If they are pets, all bets are off. They can attack instantaneously without provocation because they can. These pets are not chimpanzees. They've never been with chimps. They don't know what a demonstration is. They don't know what the proper way to behave is. They kind of know a halfway people thing and a chimp thing, which can be very dangerous. No change in facial expression, instantaneous bite, instantaneous attack. They figure out that they're stronger than you, and it just continues and continues and continues.
The Monster Quest team is well aware of the danger they face as they search the swamps of Florida in the dark of night. When the thermal camera picks up something moving in the distance, the team is on high alert.
And any heat source turns out bright red.
The men watch the monitor, and the image becomes apparent. There are two animals.
And they're about probably 125 yards away, give or take.
After studying the image for several minutes, Peterson is able to identify the animals.
There's what appears to be two whitetail out there, two white-tailed deer.
Later, Peterson checks the camera traps down by the watering hole.
We also have a Buckeye camera out, which automatically uploads photos to the computer, so you don't even have to get human scent in that area again. We're waiting on it. As you've got 12 pictures on there right now, and it's starting to download them.
Yeah.
The image is of a bobcat walking near the water source. The following morning, Peterson and Chereau will try a different tactic. They'll attempt to attract chimpanzees that may be near by using recorded chimp vocalizations.
Hogan, what calls did you load into this system?
We've got several different vocalizations, but the one we're going to be using is a long call. It's a communication call that chimpanzees use. Chimpanzees do really distinctive long calls in the wild, and they use those to locate individuals. We typically would use them during the day. The response would be another long call similar to this one.
When would we do these calls?
We're going to play these calls during the middle of the day. Chimpanzees are a diurnal animal. They're active all day long and they sleep at night. So we're most likely, if we were to get a response, would happen during the day.
Peterson and Chereau continue tracking through the wilderness of the Green Swamp, listening closely for any return calls until Peterson makes a new discovery.
This is right close to this water hole that we're looking for sign. Right here, wow, you know what this is? This is a hog that had laid down here. That's how all this mud here is flat. Those little lines you're seeing are the coarse hair. of the hog, and he was laying down, and his foot is right there, his leg is right there. Can't believe we can see the hair in the mud, the indentations, but their hair is so coarse. That's why it's making such a good indentation.
The science team is narrowing down its mapping study and comparing the known chimp habitat area of Mali, West Africa, with Florida's green swamp.
The temperature is definitely higher on an annual basis in Mali. In these two specific areas, it's probably only about 10 degrees difference in different times of the year.
Stace Wright then compares the vegetation of the two locations to determine if it could sustain a wild chimpanzee.
The vegetation in both areas, different types of trees, different types of plants. The elevation, I think I consider a difference in that in Mali, the area we're looking at is more of a plateau or uplifted area. Not that high, but certainly 200, 300 meters, that's around 1,000 feet, whereas the areas of Florida are very flat and near sea level. So that could be considered a difference. Precipitation, certainly it rains more in Florida, and some parts of Florida get much more rain than some parts of Mali. But these two specific areas, the difference is minimal.
Monster Quest is combing the green swamp of Florida for evidence of dangerous chimpanzees on the loose. This man says he saw a chimp in the green swamp of central Florida. This California man knows firsthand how savage these creatures can be. This scientist is comparing known chimpanzee habitat in Mali, Africa, to the central Florida landscape to determine if it is possible for the creatures to survive here. The Monster Quest expedition team has found a dead animal.
Here we have one of Florida's famous wild boar. They have a ton of wild boar down here. And obviously this one's been dead for a while. You can see the teeth are even dry rotted out. I don't know what happened to this hog, but you can see the side is a little bit torn out. I don't know if that's from before or after.
It is an animal that a chimp could have fed on.
We know that chimpanzees in the wild have been known to eat baby bush pigs in Africa, and so there are potential meat sources in this area.
A quick examination reveals no evidence of chimps feeding at this carcass. The team holds out hope that the camera traps at the watering hole may have captured photo evidence of one of the creatures.
So these are pictures from the field camera.
Right.
We're going to go through and see what we've picked up over the last few days on this expedition.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We've got two of them out, two separate cameras out right now.
Well, let's go ahead and roll.
Turkey.
Very cool.
Nice
wild turkey in this area. What's that?
It's a bobcat.
Oh, okay, great.
He's been coming in before daylight. Look at him just sit down right there. He's actually just sitting right on that hill. And if you remember, that chimp, pheromone chip is right here, right on the upside of that hill. From here. He's sitting right below it. Okay, again. This one, look at that. That's really cool.
It's an interesting picture.
The creature is hard to identify.
What is it?
Can you zoom in on that? We can see what that is.
Oh.
A closer look reveals its identity.
Nice shot.
Oh, it's an owl.
Landing?
Yeah, I think you're right.
You can see its wingtips.
Yep.
Its wingtips are coming down. That is cool.
Continued analysis of the photos reveals deer, bobcat, boar, and this interesting picture of what may be a rare red wolf.
I've got 3 different trail camera setups down here in Florida. We've got bobcat, turkey, raccoon, hawk, owl, deer, hog, literally everything that's down here, shy of an alligator. There's a lot of wildlife in this area. Very wild wilderness type area.
The pictures hold no evidence of a chimp.
We've searched the area extensively. We found lots of animal tracks at the waterhole, everything ranging from deer to raccoon to even a bobcat.
The investigation reveals some initially promising signs.
There were some possible fruit resources, some meat resources in the area, and some limited water resources, but none of them are sufficient to sustain a primate population.
The science team is in the final stages of its analysis to determine whether Florida's terrain has characteristics that are similar to Mali, Africa, a known habitat for chimpanzees.
The best way to compare these two areas would be under things like temperature, precipitation, vegetation, elevation, and human interaction.
Stace Wright is comparing the data from a section of each region, equal in scale.
So basically, inside both areas, you have 40 to 59.9 inches of rain. At an extreme, it could be 20 inches, but more than likely it's within 10. So it's very similar, very similar.
The average annual temperature shows a slightly greater variance, 72 to 73.9 degrees Fahrenheit in Florida, as compared to 78 for the low in Mali, with 84 degrees Fahrenheit as the high.
That's not a very big difference. We're looking at 10 degrees or less difference annually. We had in the roads, the cities. In this case, there's no urban sprawl, as it were. So just some small yellow dots showing where the villages are. It gets really interesting when we add the vegetation to it. When you add the scale in, you can see from, once again, 10 miles. It's not more than 10 to 15, 20 miles from any point to where you might run into people. And in the end, while there are some differences, there are certainly a lot of similarities. And I don't think that the differences are great enough that it would impact the ability of a species to survive in either area.
This Monster Quest search has uncovered some interesting information. The science team has learned that the habitat in the green swamp area of Florida is surprisingly similar to a known chimpanzee habitat in Mali, Africa. However, while the expedition team found food sources that are desirable to a primate, it remains unlikely that an escaped chimpanzee could survive in Florida undetected.
In the history of bad ideas for pets, chimps may be near the top. As a primatologist who studied chimpanzees for nearly 10 years in the field, I can tell you that they're incredibly intelligent, fascinating animals, especially when they're being observed in their natural habitat or in a proper captive situation. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives, and they have a lot to teach us about their own behavior and lives and about humans. But they are wild animals, and like any wild animal, when put into a situation that's not a natural situation for them, they're potentially dangerous.
It was a bizarre sighting that I saw. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it. I'm sure they would defend themselves if they were approached, so anyone had to be careful with a wild creature like that. So I'd be careful approaching one, that's for sure. I wouldn't want to approach and get too close to it.
There's probably a good number of my colleagues out there who would tend to disagree with me about chimps being able to survive in the wild here. I have seen enough myself, and I have heard enough sightings from very reputable people who are highly credible that knowing chimps and knowing how they behave, I'm convinced that what they're seeing is a chimp.